Sure, but when you've got this 50-50 split, of the same mustache twirling bad guy in different colored clothes.
The only time in US history that a legal document was ever so brief.
Basically, it's like Democrats want to screw over the poor people and not spend a bunch of money on war, and Republicans want to screw over the poor people and not spend a bunch of money on social programs. That's
like trying to sort that out. How do you have a system that meets as many possible needs as you can achieve?
Yeah, the one core element that I think needs to be a constant in your deconstruction plan is to have this idea that the transition can't happen overnight.
I'll tell you what, today the Constitution should probably be written purely with emojis.
You can't possibly come up with a tool that perfectly functions both soft and hard.
Ooh, is this gonna turn into a porno?
Not even the penis can do that. Welcome to
what?
Sphincter says what?
Oh, I'm not going to say anything. Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. Despite Casey's attempts at sabotaging things, I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for notifications. Yeah, that'd be great.
And I am Casey Rochford, and we would love it if you would stick around to the end of the episode, because we do this little thing called writing our own music. We do everything ourselves on this freaking show, to be honest. How cool is that? So if you stick around, you can hear the song, but if you want to get the song, there's a whole bunch of ways to do that. You can go to patreon.com/KSMvidcast and become a deep sink diver. Or you could go to Spotify or iTunes or Amazon or Google or Pinocchio, blah, 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 or there's all kinds of MP3 things out there. Anyway, what are we talking about tonight?
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I was just looking through my pocket Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And I was thinking, this is something I know you have brought up a few times. We never really kind of dove into it fully. And it's kind of been on the back burner for a while, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. This whole idea of updating the Constitution. And I thought maybe we could discuss that, because I kind of like to hear your thoughts on that, like where you're coming from and that kind of thing. And maybe we can kind of, I don't know.
I might have a thought or two.
Really?
I'll see what I can drudge up. I think people call it a living document, but I don't see it as a living document if it's so hard to change, right? Like, that's a problem, I think, especially. So that would not be a problem if we had a properly organized, diverse government body, right? Like several parties of different ideals being represented and things of that nature. Then sure, a 2/3 majority and however many states ratifying and all that stuff to make a change. Sure, but when you've got this 50-50 split, of the same mustache twirling bad guy in different colored clothes, you're never going to change anything.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, like, it's they're split and divided in that regard. And yeah, if you had more parties, you'd probably have a lot more common ground between them, and a lot more people with common philosophies or something like that might be interested in
right.
coming together.
And you'd have a more diverse array of people, like, pitching in the ideas of how to phrase these things so that it becomes more palatable to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Compromises and things like that. When you're just trying to compromise between, how this political party can stand to benefit and ruin the poor people's lives, or how this political party can stand to benefit and ruin the poor people's lives, but they have different ways that they want to go about it, and they fight with each other.
That's exactly. It does seem to be kind of a familiar theme there in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. It's like Democrats want to screw over the poor people and not spend a bunch of money on war, and Republicans want to screw over the poor people and not spend a bunch of money on social programs. That's
yeah, you either spend money in one area or another, and still nothing gets done. But I do have to say, the fact that this critical document, like, is so small, like, this is the only time in US history that a legal document was ever so brief. Like, it's very, very tiny. Yet, of course, that kind of forms the core of everything, and something like that probably should be simple. That's kind of my take on it is, like, because when you'd mentioned that a few times, it got the gears turning. Like, I think certainly more clarity, modernizing the language would probably be like a really important thing, because I mean, this is written in the 1700s, so
yeah,
we don't necessarily speak the same way or write the same way that they did back then. So back in that era, in the 18th century, I'm sure that everybody understood what was being said, but you read it today and most people don't. In fact, probably, I'll tell you what, today, the Constitution should probably be written purely with emojis. I'm gonna have to throw that in the beginning, I think, but
I don't know if I think simple is better. It's convenient. It's it feels nice, right? Like, oh, look how easy this is. It should be simple for everyone to understand and interpret, but that's really not the case. Like, the fewer words you use, the less your point gets across.
That's true.
And I mean, if you just look at the Second Amendment and all the people that fill in the gaps and read between the lines and add their own interpretation and try to twist it and warp it to fit the changes over hundreds of years that have drastically changed from like something that you have to like stuff a bunch of shit into and add some powder and then light it and aim it, and it's not even going to hit the broadside of a barn, to like nuclear powered weapons, like huge fucking difference.
That's true, but the point of the Second Amendment was conceptual. It was never material. But that's the thing,
and that's the problem. There wasn't enough clarity, like it. I mean, there are ways that you could phrase it to be more generalized and be clear about that. Like, if I had to do it in one sentence, I would probably say just simply, you have the right to defend yourself, and then, like, whatever legislation tries to do whatever with, how you can defend yourself or whatever, like, that can just be argued irrespective of that fact. because that's kind of plain and simple right there. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't say anything about the mode in which you can do that. Like,
Well,
the whole
yeah.
the bare arms part is the problem.
Well, well, and that semicolon, of course, does confuse things a lot. But yeah, you're right. Like, what does that mean? You know, does how do you interpret that? Like, yeah, I completely agree with you on that. That it kind of goes along with what I was saying. That there should be a kind of a conceptual sort of thing. Like, self-defense is a human right, and then let the courts sort that out after the fact. That in different jurisdictions they're going to do things differently, and that's part of being an experimental process. That is one of the good things about the US, is that we don't have a homogenous governmental structure. There's a lot of different areas performing different experiments, and I think that that's a good thing, because you know we don't know everything. If we claim to know everything, then well, yeah, you're an idiot.
And you could almost lump the Second and Third Amendment into one and just kind of generalize it, right? You have the right to defend yourself and any, you know, structure which you own and reside in.
Yeah.
And or maybe even like the soil which you have, you know, ownership of. But I mean, even that, like, the word ownership implies like you're not paying a mortgage on it, like you own it outright, you know, because there does still have to be protections for people that lend as well, right? So,
well, or your place of work too, right? Like, you're coming to work, you should be able to defend yourself there. I mean, when we were delivering papers, we dealt with that girl that, like, some guy came in with a gun or whatever and threatened her, says, I'm going to rape you and stuff. And it's like, I have a gun right here. And we were like just 2 minutes too late. And
well, see, we're already stumbling on the fact that like you really can't simplify it because there's so many caveats, you know?
Well, that's true. But then here's the it goes the other way too, in that when you start to get more verbose and you add all kinds of features and all kinds of exclusions and exemptions and things like that, then it gets confusing. Like, then all of a sudden it doesn't make any sense. And of course, then there's so many variables that you can interpret it in almost any way, which is why there's so many lawyers in this country.
I mean, that's the reason that legalese exists. But I think legalese is like too sneaky and shady in the way that it's like phrased, which is supposed to be like this certain way to be more clear, but it actually makes things way obfuscated. Like, you can't understand what's going on. And like,
no, and that's where my 10-year-old test comes in. Like, you know, you gotta go for the lowest common denominator. And I'd say like 10-year-old kids would be a good starting point, right? Like, coherent enough to understand things, but not advanced, right? So if you have
maybe high school, you know, like the point where you're starting to get cognitively aware of the real world and stuff like that, you know.
Well, maybe, but that would be
like, but I mean, that's a finer detail.
Sure, exactly. But the whole point is, you want to take the dumbest person in the country and weigh all of the laws against them. Like, you know, can they comprehend it, right? If the dumbest person in the country can't comprehend even the simplest things, well, it's no good. And that's why I'm thinking, like, 10-year-old kids, you have a panel of them. Every piece of legislation or any change to the Constitution should pass through them, and they should be able to explain what's being said in a way that's clear. And if they don't comprehend it, well, then how can we expect anybody else to, right? So that's kind of my the bar that I think should be set for that like, we should take the most simple-minded people and pass everything through them as a filter to see if it really does make sense. That's the whole thing. Like, imagine like a bunch of 10-year-olds trying to read like a mortgage contract or something. Like, yeah, come on. Even like PhDs can't comprehend that shit, so
yeah. The other thing I think would be really important to incorporate into a newer version of the Constitution would be a methodology for changing it. Like, it says you should change it if it gets fucked up. But
well, there is a methodology. There is a methodology incorporated into it, but like you had mentioned earlier, it's a very difficult one. And I kind of feel like I get where they were coming from with making it difficult, because if it's too easy, then you got too many hands in the pot and everybody's trying to change things. And, how do you keep it from going, to the whims of society as things change, and maybe just making it like obscenely difficult is the only way to do it.
Well, to clarify, I meant change the government, not the Constitution.
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
Okay, but that that's even harder.
right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, all they did was say, hey, if this screws up, try it or try again or whatever. But they didn't really like lay out how that should be done on an official level. So you've basically only left the door open for bloody revolution.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a good point. That there's and some of the statements from the founding fathers suggested that too, that actual warfare was the necessary revolutionary component. And I mean,
I agree with that.
Well,
no, it's just, so that's the human condition and the whole power trip thing, right? Like, if you've gotten to the point where your government is screwed up, they're not going to want to hand that over democratically or by any other like rigid legal means, right?
Okay,
like,
well, let me ask you this. Let's just use the USA as a I guess a template. How many people live here?
Almost 350 million, right?
Yeah. So how many politicians are there?
Oh fuck, I don't know, like hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, you could go into bureaucrats or whatever. But
yeah,
I mean,
like how far down you go.
And then you add even in the military, you're talking like 1% of the population. So it's like 99 to 1 odds there. Who has the power, really?
The one that's organized.
Well, the ones with guns, that does change the game a little bit. But then,
I mean, we all have guns though, right? But everyone that has, everyone that has guns out in the regular population isn't organized enough to actually do anything against the 1% that is organized. Like, that's the real linchpin, is the organization, not the guns.
Well, that's true, and not just being organized, that's one step, but also having a direction. Like, what is your actual plan? Like, what do you hope to gain? Sure, you could decapitate all of the French royalty. Then what? What do you do after that? Like, what's your plan beyond that? And I don't think people think that far beyond it. Man. Well, this is going down a crazy path.
And I understand that to a degree. Like, places where things just come to a boil, it's life or death. You got to do something. You don't necessarily have time to I mean, that's how America started too. It's not like we drafted the Constitution and then said, hey, let's start the Revolutionary War.
No, it was a declaration.
Things kind of happened in a more natural order of, hey, we're pissed off, fight, and then, okay, now what?
Yeah, well, I guess the good thing is that at the end, everybody shook hands and became friends and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it I don't think it is necessary to go down that route to make very major changes. It's not. It is if you feel subservient to the system, like you have no other choice but to grab your steampunk gun. But I don't think that that's always necessary. Like I said, the odds are stacked against the government. Like we really do have all the power, and everything is perceptual. So if we really wanted to change things, we totally could. We just have to stop participating, stop caring, like just go ahead with our business, just say fuck it. What can they do at that point?
People are, for as many people out in this country right now that say they don't live in fear, that's a lot of bullshit. Because so I saw a little illustration just today. I think it had a bunch of little stick figure people, and there was like 100 people on one side standing, and then like one dude with a whip, and he like cracks the whip, and then like all the people are kneeling except for one person, and then like 10 people are standing, and then like all of a sudden all of them are standing, and the guy with the whip is kneeling. And it's like, that sounds good on paper, but I mean, even as we saw with the insurrection attempts on the Capitol building or whatever back in January, there was a fair amount of people, but it was hardly enough to be effective in what they were trying to do.
Well, and the thing is, like, they're only going after like the token building, right? Like, well, that's not going to do anything. The entire they just evacuated down like some secret tunnels to another place. The government still exists. Like, you could sit in that building for a fucking 1,000 years and the government will still operate in the US. It doesn't matter.
It's like David kicking Goliath in the shin and thinking that he's going to fall over. Like, you gotta hit a few crucial points at the same time, like spread out and concentrate attacks on very like weak points at the same time, spread out over a huge geography. You got to match your attack to the size of your opponent.
Well, and if you even have to attack at all, like I'm a like Sun Tzu kind of art of war sort of person, right? Like how to defeat your enemy without ever firing an arrow or a shot or whatever. How to get them to defeat themselves, right? That's true artistry there. But of course, here's the problem. A lot of people don't think that three-dimensionally. It's kind of like black or white. Like, you're either at peace or you're at war. And
I would argue that the Republican Party is that crafty. I kind of feel like Trump was such a joke, and they knew that, and they knew that the DNC would like throw whatever crap they could at it, and basically like I think it was a chess move.
I was going to say that all of it is here's the thing. High level politics is simply chess. It obviously, only obviously. And as we learned from the movie War Games, the best way to win is not to play. Or the only way to win, I guess. I should have said it in a robot voice, but I can't do it right now. I've had too much beer. So without, because we've kind of like talked a little bit, actually, like 15 minutes or so about revolution and changing things. So it's one thing to say, okay, it should be changed, but my thought is, what should be changed, right? Like, everybody agrees, like, well, I'm sure that most people agree that there are flaws with the Constitution, and there are things that should be updated. Flaws all over the place across the board in the entire system of governance in the US. So let's say you just had the magic pen, right? You could just like rewrite everything and change it. What would you do? Like what? Just the big stuff, right?
I mean, it would be mostly additive. Like the skeleton of the Constitution is pretty good. I mean, it's as much as it's treated like the Bible or the Ten Commandments, let's say, it's far better at covering a lot of the bad shit that could have happened than the Ten Commandments are. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, how about don't covet your neighbor's oxen or whatever. It's
I
like,
was thinking the exact same thing.
and it's like, oh,
covet your neighbor's wife. That's it.
I guess we could bump rape off and put the ox in there. I guess, you know, let's do that. You know, yeah. So I mean, like it's better than the Ten Commandments at least, but at the same time, I feel like there is just a lot. I mean, a lot missing. And then, of course, we always rag on the Third Amendment, which was like a little bit like too hyper specific. But I think if you just altered it to be about like property, you know, like your property is yours or whatever, you know, like,
yeah.
Or you could take it a whole different direction and just be like, property is everyone's as long as they're not like fucking your shit up, you know, like the Sweden approach, Allemansrätten. You know, I like that better. You know, somebody walks through your lawn, okay, whatever, you know.
Yeah, and I think that that's a pretty reasonable thing. That now there's a threshold where it changes. Of course, if somebody walks across your property to get to the other side, right, then there's no harm, no foul, right? It's like, oh, hey, I'm just passing through, no big deal. But if they pitch a tent and then they build a cabin and then they start like having kids and all of a sudden they, you know, like where's the defining line where you say, oh, wait, that's too much?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Because I mean, like, honestly, who's it hurting? You know, like having a little less lawn space, objectively speaking, isn't really like.
Well, harmful. Okay, let's substitute lawn space with living room space.
Well, that's where you get into the without fucking up somebody else's property, right? Like,
but somebody could argue, well, I'm not doing any harm. I'm just, you know, my whole family is just sleeping in this living room. Huh?
How did you get in there? Say the door is locked. If you want to pitch a tent in that living room, you're gonna have to bust the door or a window. And
but
now
what if it wasn't someone's locked? Property. What if well, somebody then like
you're screwed. You should have locked your door.
Well, but that's kind of, yeah. I don't like that.
That's why I was saying, like, you know, earlier I had alluded to, you know, like defend yourself and whatever structure you reside in, right? Yeah. Because, you know, we've basically always thought in a territorial manner about structure. Like even Native Americans, I'm sure, probably, you know, with their teepees or their like longhouses or whatever that particular tribe had. I'm pretty sure if a rival tribe showed up and just like walked in, they'd be like, oh, you know, you get out. But like for the most part, a lot of what they thought was like the earth belongs to no one, right? So there's already that kind of like human nature for wherever it is that you set up camp, that's yours, and everyone kind of understands that, I think.
Yeah, for the most part. Well, so let's see. Oh man.
But I mean, that's one of those things where like you gotta be careful about how specific you get, because the way we reside, the way we live, the way we build structures, things like that could change in ways that we can't even fathom right now.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, and that's why I don't like the idea of very explicit structural elements in our rule book, I guess. I prefer conceptual elements.
Yeah.
And because the concepts stay the same. Human nature pretty much stays the same. Technology, all this stuff changes over time and everything, but human nature remains, well, largely unchanged over the millennia.
And that's why I was thinking, say, like whatever structure you reside in, because that could be a house, it could be a tent, it could be a park bench that you're sleeping on. That's a structure that you're residing in at the moment. It could be your floating force field bubble in the upper stratosphere, you know, like whatever it is that we evolve into living in, you know, like it would be some kind of structure of some sort that could contain somebody.
Yeah.
You know?
And so then, of course, when you use language like that in the future, people are going to be like, well, we don't call it structures anymore, we call it something else. And so now then you have to re-update it again to fit that.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a very difficult thing to create like a one size fits all, everybody's happy, life is good kind of system. I mean, the Constitution is, like you said, I think it's pretty brilliant, very well thought out, still has some flaws. The Bill of Rights part of it is all over the place.
Yeah.
And so like the amendments and stuff, that how many amendments have there been? There really haven't been very many.
20,
Hang on a second. I happen to have a pocket
21 or
Constitution.
22, I think.
Oh God, it's in it's Roman numerals.
Oh.
25, 6, 7, 27. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Which is the alcohol one?
I think that was 18th.
23, I think. Wait, no.
Well, there was one prohibiting and then one undoing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, fuck that shit.
Which is also silly. Like, why not just scratch out the one that you want to get rid of? Like, what the hell is this?
Why still keep it? And say, oh, by the way,
Amendment 23, disregard Amendment.
Yeah, that one that you read a minute ago, that no longer applies. Oh man.
Yeah. Imagine reading that down stepwise. Amendment 18, do not drink alcohol. Oh yeah, cut his head off. Oh shit, wait a minute. Oh crap. I just got to 23. Crap. Can you put his head back on real quick?
Yeah, imagine if law enforcement was like that. Like carried all of the old legacy things. They had to like evaluate them one at a time. Oh man. Wow.
But yeah, I mean, like, I don't think the Constitution outlines anything about like what a life is either, right?
No, there's a lot of assumptions linguistically there that people are going to understand what is meant.
Yeah, because that's another huge contention that is you know, like issues like abortion or, you know, autonomy of your own body, like assisted suicide and you know, all of that stuff. Like,
well, they dealt with that in Star Trek TNG with Measure of a Man, right?
Yeah.
With Data.
With a lot of episodes, really.
Yeah. Like, what is life? And Data eloquently argued that fire could be life. And that was a turning point where I was like, ooh, oh man, oh, you're right. Holy shit.
Yeah, well, yeah, it really depends on your definitions, and definitions change over time. Like what we consider dead has changed in, well, like for some of us in our own lifetimes, the definition has changed for some of the ones of us with gray in our beards and things like that,
and our hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Like went from heartbeat to breathe, or breathing to heartbeat to brain activity, or like all kinds of stuff. And we constantly find ways to redefine that sort of thing. And
oh yeah, well, and what if somebody like fails all those tests of whether you're dead or not, and then they're dead, and then they're resuscitated and brought back to life, and then they pass all those tests? Like, what are they like a new person now?
Right. Or like take a parasite, for instance. Is it alive because it does require a host, another living being, in order for it to actually survive.
Yeah.
It cannot survive on its own. And so if you compared what we consider life to an embryo, and then compared a parasite to an embryo, which one is more like?
Ooh. And then are we full of parasites by those same definitions? Like, yeah, obviously.
I mean, that's a given, but
yeah. But should we kill them because they're parasites, even though they're keeping us alive?
It's not alive.
Yeah. Oh man, the symbiotic stuff, man, this is getting
and viruses aren't technically alive, but bacteria are, and
oh man, that could be its own episode, actually. So what do you think, like any other ideas, constitutional changes, things like that?
I have a bunch. I've mentioned this a few times on the show, that I had started coming up with kind of outlining a plan for a better way of structuring things, like a new constitution, a new government system, and things like that. And actually, I just pulled it up. The very first thing I put in there is called deconstruction. Like, I thought it was so important that you just start off by saying, if any of this screws up, here's how you tear it down peacefully and start over again. I feel like
I think you're onto something there. That is an important feature that was left out of the Constitution.
Yeah,
because they basically said, like,
do it.
Oh, just do a reset. And it's like, well, how?
Right.
How do you do that?
Gee, thanks for the tip. Like, if you follow things to their natural end, everything changes. Everything comes to an end. And it's a given that the system of government is going to collapse at some point. And to just say, hey, this obvious thing is going to happen, it doesn't help anybody. But like
this obvious thing that will obviously happen is going to happen. So when it occurs, go ahead and do it. But no criteria or process for how to do it.
Yeah. So like my first like clause or whatever is basically saying that, like, just that, like, any system of government will eventually break down and need to start anew. So it basically just establishes that your very first paragraph should be deciding how you would want to peacefully create the next one based off of how this one is laid out. Like,
I think all of this should be like scientific. Like, we should take the information we gain from these experiments and go forward and say, okay, well, this is what worked, this is what didn't. So let's
Right.
build a better system, right? Because
Right.
engineering,
Yeah.
it's simple engineering, 101.
Yeah. Think of it like a one of those little safety warnings in the beginning of an instruction manual, right? If
Mm-hmm.
this goes wrong, here's how you fix it, or don't do this because it'll blow up, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's got like, fail safes and warnings and things like that. Like, just look at it like that, think ahead like that, and try to plot what that would look like or what that should look like. And I mean, it can be basically pretty general because that's going to change quite a bit, and it
Oh
really
yeah.
shouldn't be that specific. But like, the second part of that was, it really shouldn't be so rigid, and it shouldn't be difficult to have conversations about changing it. And it's like, if you make it easy to change, you can always easily change it back if it's not working.
In
And
theory,
that's the
yeah.
give and take. That's,
Mhm.
I mean, and if you have your government structured in the right way, where it's not, just this bipolar shit that we have, um, that should always be 100% possible, right?
Well, as long as you're not seeing them as overlords and more like viewing the entire experience as an experiment. I think that
Yeah.
holds true. Um,
Mhm.
Unfortunately, at this point, it's become the former rather than the latter.
Well, yeah, again, to go back to science, treat it like a teaching hospital.
Mhm.
The way they, I mean, at least at UW, I know this is what they do. Um, they have a round of people that spend a month in the clinic observing patients and getting hands on and seeing what's going on. And then
Mhm.
the next month they go into the laboratory and they do research, and they trade that back and forth, and they meet with different teams and stuff. Like, they change things up on the regular, and that would translate to term limits. uh
Okay, yeah. Well,
you know
exactly. But here's the
for
thing.
everything, for
The
all the governmental staff needs
Oh,
to
I
be
totally
limited.
agree. Judges, especially, like,
Mhm.
why do you have a lifetime
No
commission?
reason whatsoever for
Oh,
that.
that makes no sense.
Dumbest shit ever.
Yeah, but the focus of what you're doing, like in science, is trying to test things and uncover information. And in politics, it's kind of the opposite. Like, basically, just like lording over people and telling them what to do. And there's no incentive to improve things or make it streamlined or have a better idea come forth. It's basically that I I had a point,
So
but hmm. go
so
go
so the
ahead.
one yeah the one core element that I think needs to be a constant in your deconstruction plan is to have this idea that the transition can't happen overnight. You
Yeah.
have to plan a way for it to be phased in over a certain amount of time.
Oh, I agree. And
You know,
having goals too. Like,
yeah. I mean,
what are
that's
you
the only peaceful
actually
way to do it.
going for? Like, what are you going for? What are
Yeah,
you hoping to achieve? That's an important thing.
yeah,
Like, performing acts of politics for the sake of politics doesn't do anything. It just perpetuates the machine.
right.
Um,
It's like, if, for instance, if you did nothing else to change your government except say there will be term limits now for everything, then you've got people that kind of have already based their end of life planning on this being their career and their retirement plan and everything. So it's like maybe you phase those people out with a longer runway, right? Give them a little more chance to get a contingency plan going. If they're past a certain age, you just let them go, like, or cover a better pension or whatever, like be thoughtful and remember that everybody's a human being. But
That's an important thing that is often forgotten.
Yeah, but you got to put your foot down and say things are changing and it can't be this way anymore. And like start implementing, anyone that gets voted in from this point on does 2 years and that's it. And we'll stagger elections so that it's not a complete changeover every 2 years or whatever. And roll it probably should be every 6 months, or things are changing and it's kind of go round robin. But however you work, like phase it in.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's
because that gives you an out to the whole bloody revolution, I think.
Oh yeah.
It says to people like, I know you're resistant to change, but we're going to compromise and we're going to phase you out as comfortably as possible and try to take care of you because you're a human being.
Yeah, and that's something that's very difficult to deal with, because
except Mitch McConnell, he's a tortoise.
Sorry. Because people are resistant to change. You get used to things being a certain way and they change. And now all of a sudden it's an unfamiliar world, right? Like, oh, trying to teach your grandma to use the internet. And like, she can't wrap her head around it. But it's like, well, the whole world is using the internet now. This is how things work. Electricity, right? At one point in time, there were candles and what do they have? Arc lights and kerosene lanterns and things like that. And then all of a sudden there were tungsten bulbs and fluorescent bulbs and LEDs. And yeah, like the world changes.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. Like,
a great philosopher once said, as I try to find my way to the ordinary world, I will learn to survive.
Nice.
People will adapt,
Mm-hmm.
as the great Simon Le Bon said.
Oh man. Oh, I feel like we haven't really covered.
This one should be like almost a series, and we should do some live ones with some guests, because this is the sort of thing where you need a whole lot of different viewpoints.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows where I stand on this as an anarchist. Like, but it's still an interesting thought experiment, and I think it's very valuable to talk about. And I definitely like having different viewpoints, more schools of thought mixed in. Yeah, absolutely.
So you've said before that you're a minarchist, is that right? Or is that somebody else I'm thinking of?
That's somebody else. I'm a voluntarist.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of wondering, like, is that sort of a situation where it's like you understand that there may need to be some level of structure, like something written down somewhere that just kind of like you can allude to and be like, hey,
well,
what you're doing is kind of fucked up, because
that would be what you're saying is kind of minarchism, but it still exists in anarchism. That there's still an underlying philosophy, but definitely not necessarily what's the word, written down on paper, I guess, as law. Yeah.
Interesting. We really should do a whole episode on anarchism because there's a lot of wonder about that.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. Probably not so much now that I've had a few beers. No, I still have thoughts.
Glad one of us does.
Oh man. Yeah, I think we should make this kind of an ongoing thing, like an ongoing conversation. Because that's the thing, it's like I have my own ideas, you have your own ideas, everybody else does too.
Yeah.
So how do we find some kind of middle ground where everything gels nicely?
Yeah.
And this to me is kind of one of the most compelling quests, I guess, that like trying to sort that out. How do you have a system that meets as many possible needs as you can achieve? Because the current system definitely doesn't. It's only obvious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the trouble, isn't it? Because it's like trying to use a hammer to do everything, right?
Yeah,
Or
when all you have
let's not even
is
say a
hammer.
hammer, because that implies that there's like a lot of force behind it. You know, like let's just say you're trying to use a wobbly screwdriver on everything.
A hammer is a good example for the government because that is exactly what they wield. You know, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Just saying.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good enough analogy for the point I was trying to make, is that you've got some people that think less is more, so a hammer's too much, and then you got people who think hammer's not quite cutting it, we need like an impact drill or something, you know.
yeah, exactly.
You know, we got to really like grind into this thing, and you know, you can't possibly come up with a tool that perfectly functions both soft and hard, you know, like,
ooh,
I
this
mean,
gonna turn into a porno?
not even the penis can do that, you
No,
know?
that's a good point. That it's kind of like my ideas on multi-tools. Like they're great for half-assing through things. Like, okay, yeah, you got a Phillips screwdriver, you got like a bottle opener and a knife and some pliers and scissors and stuff, but they suck at all of those things.
Yeah.
So trying to like fill every need might actually be an impossible task. That's kind of the thing that led me to where I am, I guess, is like, oh yeah, this is actually impossible. There is no one ring to rule them all in governance. And if there is, I would like somebody to enlighten me as to what it is. Yeah.
I feel like there could be, it just needs to be the right blend of complexity and sensibility.
Well, okay, I agree with that, but then
like if it gets too complex, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Sure.
If it's not complex enough, nobody can make sense of it. Which sounds like the same thing, but it's not quite right. Like, because you know, if it loses its sensibility, it's like it is saying something pretty specific, but nobody can really like fit all the pieces together or like possibly know the whole thing, like the IRS code, you know.
Oh God.
Like that became too complex to be sensible. But our Constitution is so not complex that nobody can make sense of it, because times have changed to the point where our culture and our language and all of that stuff and our technology doesn't fit it anymore.
Well, it's so simple that people argue over a fucking semicolon. Like,
mm-hmm.
So I would ask, naturally,
which is the greatest piece of punctuation ever.
Exactly. So I'm going to ask at the 11th hour, why do we even need governance as human beings? Aren't we capable of just living our lives peacefully on our own? Why do we need somebody like pulling the puppet strings?
No, we're not. And it's really simple to me. It's because we're individuals and we have our own wants and needs and opinions, and those are guaranteed to not jive with others, and
well, but why do we I guess invite other strangers to direct our lives for us?
Because it's not like anyone's saying it's a perfect system, but it's probably a whole lot better than a lot of other ideas could be. Like anytime you try to break it down to the point where people have more and more will to just do whatever they want, is where you start inviting transgressions on other people.
Okay, but then doesn't the system of governance itself present a tantalizing target for those who want to control people? And would that not then invite pretty much universally only people who are control freaks into that system? Because that's all that's all you can do in that system. So that's all you invite.
If your Constitution was laid out in such a way that it limited the ways that you can create law, like if you put limits in place using your Constitution on what a law can and cannot do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could take away that control factor and just basically make it pretty cut and dry, right? Like you wouldn't have laws on the books like, if you get released from jail, you will get a horse and your weight in silver, or, like super specific dumb shit based on arbitrary aesthetic things. Like,
well,
it should
things
just
that
be
might have made sense a long time ago but don't now. That's a thing too.
Yeah, I mean to me, like a law should really just be there shouldn't be as many laws as there are. I think
I totally agree. They always say lawmakers, but where are the law breakers? Where are the people who like kill the laws?
But it's like there's it's become so convoluted that there's laws protecting things that harm people,
Yeah.
which to me sounds ridiculous. Like we were talking earlier about the alkaline water thing. There is no way on earth you will ever find a scientific study that shows that drinking alkaline water does any good for you, but you'll find plenty that says it harms you, but it's on the shelves and you can go buy it and drink it to your heart's desire and potentially die or screw your cells up,
or just get heartburn or something.
You could do really bad shit to yourself. And it's like, why do we allow people to make money off of hurting other people and telling them that they're doing good for those people? That's bad.
You mean like politicians do, sending kids to war?
Yeah. But
for
you know,
oil and bullshit reasons.
but you know, like things like that, it says, it implies a need for, this might sound like an oxymoron. It sounds like it implies a need for fewer laws, but more regulation, you know?
Hmm. Interesting.
Like taking the legality out of, I don't even know how to explain this. So
We might
like
have to actually go revisit this again.
yeah, because it's a really complex ideation about, like, you know, I just think law should be kind of like cut and dry, like protecting life and limb sort of thing,
I
right? Like,
honestly, I agree. I
yeah,
totally agree. Um, and
which would but see, you can draw the line from that to what I was saying about the alkaline water, right? Like you could say,
mhm,
you could argue that this is a harm to limb at the very
yeah,
least, or whatever. You could
you can inject your religion into things and do all
yeah,
kinds of
or
damage.
yeah, or it could even get all squirrely and screwed up, and somebody could say, well, we shouldn't be selling peanuts in a grocery store because somebody might be allergic. There's all kinds of slippery slopes that, oh my god,
Yeah. Oh man. Oh yeah. Exactly.
head's gonna
Shit.
explode now.
uh,
Ugh.
well, I think we haven't had enough beer, but I think we've covered this topic pretty well
Yeah.
given the time. I mean, we're about an hour in now. And I think it was freaking amazing. Like, oh my God, wow. We
Yeah.
talked about a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of loose ends we have to tie up. Um, and we will, I promise.
To be continued.
I give you my word. Hmm.
What we really
Mm.
should do is just, to be continued this, go take a piss, get more beers, and then record a next episode and keep going.
Oh man, I think we've had too many beers to continue it coherently. I mean, if you can still comprehend what I'm saying, maybe. But I would almost like to let this one kind of brew a little bit and get some comments, get some people thinking. Maybe we can bring some people on and talk to them, get their ideas. Because that's the whole thing. Like, to me, I think you you got to have conversations. You can't just be like, well, I know everything and leave it at that. Like, that's exactly how politicians do. Um, yeah, you got to talk to average people and everybody else. Um, and
Ooh, aptitude tests for whatever office you're running for. Maybe that
mm,
should be like a requirement for
mm,
putting your name in the hat. Can you pass this basic test,
ooh.
to say you know enough to speak on behalf of the people?
Just watching that shit show that was the congressional hearings about the internet with like the CEO of Google and Facebook and all those different things. They didn't know anything. They don't know like they literally know less than a newborn baby knows about the subject. And yet they're the ones tasked with legislating things and diverting guys with guns to people to enforce those laws against them. Oh man, yeah, that was honestly, some people got really bent out of shape, but I was like, oh, popcorn, this is amazing. This is really humorous. It's like a comedy show. Well, I've always said, like, the government is the comedy branch of the United States. Like, yeah. Man, I think that's probably enough for now. I think
Yeah.
I've had enough beer. I probably haven't, but I'm gonna have more later.
Yeah. So give us your thoughts in the comments. Let us know if you'd like to join us live sometime for one of these types of discussions, and maybe we'll see you on the next Deep Sync Live.
Yeah. If you have some thoughts and stuff, like, please share them. And if you think you have a lot of thoughts, maybe we'll bring you on the show and we can talk about it. It'll be very enjoyable. Yeah. So
stick around for the song, and
oh yeah, there's gonna be a good one at the end, I think.
get our latest album on Spotify or iTunes. And,
oh, excuse me.
thanks for Deep Sync burping with us. Have a good night.